When I bought the sedan, it had an electric fan on it and it was wired like absolute shit. The wiring literally went from the positive high amperage cable to a switch in the dash, not like an electric fan controller, like an actual physical switch. Power went from the switch to the fan, then from the fan to ground. So that is a total terrible way to design a fan or to wire a fan, and it almost burned my car down because of it. So I completely ditched the electric fan and went with a original clutch fan setup just for simplicity. The clutch fan won't burn my car to the ground, but I think it's time that we throw the electric fan back on. So we're going to be doing an electric fan install conversion. I know some of you guys have wanted that for a while. I am excited about this because this is not going to burn my car to the ground. So the only thing that I want to do, we're not going to be installing all of this and ripping the car apart today because I still need to get some parts for it. But I did kind of want to get a connector for this. So this comes off the fan and there's another wire that goes to the fan. So this is pretty much like a chasing ground relay, kind of. So it switches the ground on and off, not the power. So the fan is always going to have power going to it even when the car is off. It's just that when the fan controller is off, it's going to be cutting the ground, so the flow is not going to go anywhere. What I wanted to get a little harness to wire that into, and then I can wire a harness, like a harness connector, onto the fan itself. So something like this where you can pretty much just unplug the connection so I don't have to like hardwire the fan on. So should I have to take the fan off for some reason, I can literally just unplug it and I don't have to cut the wires and all that mess. So that would be cool. I also bought the probe kit. So some of them, they'll have like a little heat band that you can stick like on a hose or on the side of the radiator that'll read the temperature of what it's reading, and then you can adjust the fan through that. But I got a probe one, so this is literally going to bolt into the side of the radiator. I was planning on going where that guy is because I don't think I'm using this little thing. I'm pretty sure this is for the AC, the secondary fan in there. So I don't have an AC system, so we're gonna get an adapter and run that straight into the side of the radiator like that, and then run that up to our fan controller. So that'll be pretty trick. So that's what I'm talking about there. So it kind of looks weird, but this is a 3/8 NPT, so the threads are actually tapered. So in theory that should seal, and it also in theory that's how it should look. It just looks really freaking jank because it's like not in all the way, but if that's how it's gonna be, that's how it's gonna be. So alright, so what I was thinking that could be kind of cool, I was kind of thinking, I don't know if this is going to work, but we could wire the electric fan setup on the car without really putting it on the car. So what I mean by that is we could have the fan controller on, hooked up everything, and then just have the fan being powered externally, so we have like the fan sitting down here, and that way we can get the setup dialed in and the fan working properly with it out of the car, so when we go to do the cooling system rebuild, all we literally have to do is throw it on and it works. So I wanted to mount the fan controller like over there somewhere. So that is the connector, the little probe thing, and the wires are not that long, so I don't think we're gonna have the room to run it that far. So we're probably going to have to put it somewhere over here. We'll kind of plug it like that. So I'm just going to drill 2 little holes into there, and then we'll run some little tiny guys. So this guy comes off of the fan. So that comes off of the ground side of the fan, so the fan is always hot. This is going to go to chassis ground, which is going to be super easy. This wire is for an override switch for the fan. I don't think we're going to initially wire this in, but we might at some point. And then this guy is going to go to switched ignitions. Ooh, look at that, baby! So I did have to oversize the holes in the mounting bracket for this thing just a tiny bit. And then I drilled this one, tapped it, bolted it down, and once this one was down and tight, I used that kind of to guide the other one. So I drilled a tiny little pilot hole, and then I oversized that hole just a little bit, big enough for the tap, and then I tapped it. But that thing is freaking on. The only thing that has movement to it is that relay. So I'm psyched with that. And that's going to give us just enough room to get that guy plugged in comfortably so the lines or the wires aren't being stressed and pulled on, you know. So I'm pretty happy with that mounting point. So we do need to start figuring out our wires for this. This ground one's going to be stupid simple because I can literally cut it anywhere and just mash it anywhere and make it work. This guy is going to come off of the fan negative, which is going to be somewhere over here, so I'm not worried about that for now. Not worried about that either. So we can start going after this guy. So I just need to find a live key on. Alright, so this pin right here, that guy right there has key on power. So when the key is off, you've got almost no voltage. When we turn the key on, same pin, we got voltage, baby. Alright, so that's cool. So we're gonna tap into that pin for our little yellow guy. Why? Alright, so when we bought the Cheeto, it came with these hideous headlights. But they do have some pretty nice connectors, and here are some single wires connectors right there. So I'm thinking we could cut and splice these guys into some of these. So I think we're going to take that connector and pop that little pin out and then run the connector on the bottom of that, and that way the fan controller can just kind of clip into place using these things. I would like to make this so that it's like easily removable. I do plan on doing motor things to this car, like pulling it out. I do want to regasket the whole thing at some point, but at some point in the future this motor is going to be coming out of the car, and when I do that I want it to be able to be easily removable pretty much. So that when I go to pull the motor out, when I go to take the harness off, I don't have to cut all the wiring for the electric fan. I can literally just disconnect it, and so this is going to be a nice on that. The only thing that I'm probably going to need to order is a harness for that, because all of the harnesses I have laying around will not support 15 to 30 amps. So I think this fan runs at 15 amps. I don't even know if it says, but I looked it up and I'm pretty sure it's 15 amps. I'll probably just get like a connector for 30 amps just to make it a little bit easier in case I want to splice in another fan with it, because we have that fan down there that is literally not connected to anything. So in case I want to wire another fan up to it, it'll make it just a little bit easier. So, alright, so I'll probably spend close to an hour trying to figure out how to get that little harness connector out of that main diagnostic port. So for those of you guys who are following and want to do an electric fan conversion similar to mine, this is a diagnostic port off of my M42 wiring harness that we're no longer using because we have an M50 car, and I figured it out. You got that thing going on. So this has a little connector that goes on there that this thing like mounts to, and it's got a little screw, and then it's got a thing under here that comes off, but it doesn't really matter. This thing is chopped to shit because I've been trying to figure it out for like an hour. So I have a tiny little screwdriver here, and this guy is pretty much the exact same size as the pin, and it'll actually slide through. I stick the little harness or the screwdriver in that harness like that, and then if you just push the shit out of it, boom, that'll come out. A little harness connector there. So I pretty much just stuck that through there like that, so the wire is just kind of sitting on the end there, and I just smacked a bunch of solder onto that. Now I know that's not the proper way to do it, simply because it doesn't have a really solid mechanical connection, but I don't think that wire is going to be stressed too much, honestly. So I think that will be okay for the meantime. I'm going to wrap the crap out of it with some electrical tape. I should be using heat shrink actually, but in the case that I do need to use that little connection again, I pretty much just come in and snip the solder right where the solder is, and then I can just pull that off, and then I can just stuff that thing back up in that OBD port and be good if I ever need to reuse that. So this was just a test. This side of this harness is going to be what connects to our little yellow guy, so I'll just snip that. And this is a pretty similar gauged wire, even though the red looks bigger, it's just thicker insulation on that, so I'm not super concerned. I don't believe this circuit pulls a lot of amperage, so I'm not too crazy about running a fuse through that. I kind of want to, but the Mishimoto thing states that, or it doesn't say anything about needing a fuse on this circuit, so I'm not like super worried about it. So I think we're gonna go run that. Ooh, there she is. So it's all dialed in, if this will focus. It's all soldered up, so now we get to wrap this boy, and we have a quick connect for that young fan controller. Alright, so I'm just gonna say this real quick. This video is probably gonna be edited like absolute garbage because I'm just all over the map right now, making things work and getting places. So if you're following, excellent. If you're not, God help you. So I got the soldering on this done. You guys saw that. I cleaned it up and wrapped the wires, and this is pretty much what I ended up with. So it looks stock, except we have one little wire peeking out here with a little connector on it. So that is our key on 12 volts for the fan controller. So that just sort of hangs out there, which is freaking beautiful. I just got finished soldering the 12 volt wire to the other end of that harness. Yellow, pretty sure it's yellow. Yellow to switch ignition. Yeah, so that's the right wire. Okay, so we have that. So I gotta wrap that and make that look all nice, and that has enough room to reach from where that's mounted. So it would be good to point out that this install has taken well over a month because I'm lazy, but I got this right here. I think this is like an RV extension cord or some shit, but it's rated for 30 amps and it's pretty much a connector like that. So that is pretty freaking stout. So we're gonna cut this in half, run one end to the fan, and then the other end is gonna go on the fan controller itself. This power cord, so this goes from the positive up to the fan, so the fan is always hot. Then the negative wire goes to the fan controller, this guy, which switches on and off the ground. So if you disable the ground, the circuit won't flow, the fan won't work. If you turn the ground on, complete the circuit, the fan will work. So that's how that works. So pretty much one end of this connector is going to go there, and then the other end is going to go to the fan controller. And that's pretty much how that whole little dingle setup is going to be. I think this fan only runs at 15 amps, so we should be fine with that. This wire is thicker than the power wire supplied, so I think we'll make that work. So now we just got to run the harness for the fan, and then I got to figure out my ground setup, and then we'll be chilling. There we go. So we're going to go red to red, black to black. So that's pretty much the makeup. Alright, so I'm gonna outright say that was probably the worst soldering job I've ever done in my life, and I'm not even gonna show it to you guys because it's horrible. So straight to the finished result, here it is, all nice and wrapped so it doesn't look like absolute trash, but we have a connector on our SPAL fan, baby! So now we can just plug this thing in, and I don't have to hardwire it to the car, and bing bada boom. Full removable system, which is ace. So now that one's gonna go to there, and this one is going to go over to that. I think we could probably cut this quite a bit actually, because that wire-ish is pretty long. So the whole trick to this, yeah, so that does have some length. So I'll probably give this, well, we are going to have to cut it after the fuse. So we'll deal with that later on. This, however, this is probably a good bit longer than it needs to be, but that's okay. I do have an M42 harness over here somewhere, and I already kind of cut the shit out of it. Look at that! So that's the little guy off the M42 harness I just snipped right there on the passenger side stuff. So we can run that to one end. So that'll be a factory bolt-in style, which will bolt in on one of these guys over here. And it looks to be the same gauge wire, and then the other end of that wire is going to plumb into that guy, sort of like that. So that'll be the fan wire, and then this red one will go on that black wire, stunting. Alright, so I got that side done. This one actually didn't turn out too bad. So this is the other side of that fan wire going to our little harness. I think it's just hard to solder because it's really thick wire, and I'm using some dinky ass old little soldering gun. but that one actually didn't turn out too bad. So that's it for the power wire. Alright, so there we go. Wired to the fan controller. So I'm going to wrap this section together up until the fuse. I might even go after the fuse just a little bit to sort of clean it up. But that is what is going to plug into the fan over there. And then we'll have pretty much a full bolt-in system. Alright, so here is the finished result. So this is our harness. And that is going to plug into the fan like that. Fan's all wired up. So that guy's going to bolt to the car. This boy is going to string over and plug in to our little positive terminal up here. Boom, so that wire is going to run down. The fan control is mounted there. The fan is over there. Fan wire runs somewhere around here, plugs in, bing bada boom. And then this yellow wire is going to come up to our little diagnostic port, which is this guy, which is key on. So the fan control is only going to be on when the key is on. And then we need to find a little ground source for this guy, which honestly I was thinking about just making a little eyelet, and then you could literally just bolt him down there with the 10. So that would be a pretty sick setup. Alright, baby! Look at that. So I just took the ground strap off of that wiring harness, the M42 harness that is on the passenger side, and I just soldered that little eyelet on there. So now I can literally bolt that down with it, and that'll be ground. So that's pretty simple. The wire is super short, which makes it nice. And there is our Frankenstein plug and play electric fan setup, ready to be plugged in and party. So that's cool. Alright, so a few days ago we finished the harness for the fan controller. Now I want to get the setup tested and dialed in. I'm going to be rebuilding the cooling system starting tomorrow. We're going to rip this thing fully apart, and I want to make sure that the fan is dialed in and working functionally before it becomes the only fan on the system. So here's the plan right now. I am going to install this. This is our coolant temp sensor that's in the side of the radiator. We're going to swap that out for the plug on the old cooling system just to make sure that the fan is working. And I also wanted to go drive it and get the car fully up to temp and then actually start tuning the fan. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing it this way and not doing it at the same time is in case it's not wired or it's not working properly. I want to know that before I put the whole thing on. Also, driving it with the car up to temp means the cooling system will be fully up to temp properly for me to actually tune and adjust the fan. So the fan controller itself, that little rubber plug there, you pop that guy out, and there's a little screw in there that you adjust to turn on and off the fan, pretty much the temperature engagement point for the fan. Now, the issue that I have with tuning a fan on this setup is that the coolant temp sensor for the fan is on the radiator, and the coolant temp sensor in the car on the dash is off of a coolant temp sensor that is on the cylinder head back over here. So what that means is on the initial bleed, on the initial run of the first time you get it up to temp, the coolant temp sensors, the motor could be technically up to temperature, but the whole cooling system is not. So all of the coolant could theoretically at a certain point before it gets properly up to temp could be at different temperatures. So what you could have is that sensor that's reading off the dash reading one thing and this sensor reading cooler. So I want the whole thing to be uniformly one temperature to adjust the fan, because what I don't want to do is adjust the fan when the coolant temp's at 190 up here, but at like 140 up here. We're gonna plug this guy in, go drive the car for 10 or 15 minutes after I bleed the cooling system, make sure that it doesn't overheat, make sure that everything is working properly, and then we'll throw the fan controller on and make sure the fan works and dial it in as far as temperature. I freaking dropped the washer for it. So this is the actual probe, so that'll screw into there and it'll be party time. Alright, so I fired it up. I had like 2 or 3 tiny little air bubbles come out, but nothing really too major. So now we're gonna go for a drive. maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, get the whole thing up to temp, and then we'll come back and install the electric fan controller and hook everything up. Alright, so I took it for a drive. Everything's all nice and hot. So now we can go ahead and run the fan controller setup and get it dialed in. Plug in our key on. Alright, so we're all wired up. Everything's plugged in. We got our fuse, our fan is wired. It's weighed down so the fan's not going anywhere, and it's also lifted off the ground on some wood blocks so the fan blades don't hit anything and it doesn't throw itself to shit. We got our power wire wired in, we got our key on wired on, got our ground on. Everything aside from the green wire, which is the override switch, is plumbed. So that's good. We're gonna wire that at some point in the future, not for now. That wire is way too long, but I'm not worried about that right now. Alright, so we're running. The fan isn't on yet. I think I do need to make some adjustments to that unit, but so far the thing's not on fire, so that's a pretty good sign. Hey, that's working. Alright, so that works. So the fan controller is dialed in, wired, connected, and working. So I'm probably gonna have to do some more adjustments to the setup when we rebuild the cooling system. The rest of the install is going to be with those videos when I do rebuild the whole cooling system on this thing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I'll see you guys later.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search for